course they did. You know, they came up for the cruiserweight show as well, but they were doing other things. There's other, you know, that's just the nature of the industry that we're in. Some people you can get, and some people you can't, and some people get opportunities because people like those guys are doing incredibly well. Jack Gallagher, who was like nobody had heard of him, but I knew about him, and because one of those two guys wasn't in that tournament, got an opportunity in that, and look what it's led to with him, and he's the guy that everybody's talking about. You know, just so those guys are already doing wonderful, and no doubt they'll end up coming to work here one day, whenever they're doing whatever they're doing and finishing up doing whatever they're doing. But it gives a lot of people, you know, a great opportunity. You look on that stage there, I'm not sure what people think about what the standard of British wrestlers now. They all look like there's a team of proper hard-looking fellas, you know, which is one of our things. You know, Triple H's biggest thing to me when we started doing this. Whoever I mentioned to him, he said, "Do they look like they can actually beat somebody up?" Because you know, that's part of our job. Wrestlers should look like fighters. Because at the end of the day, that's what we are. You know, we're portraying a professional fighter. So, some people can get away with anything. They don't have to look. But that's the exception. Most people who turn the TV on, they want to look at wrestling. If you're not a die-hard fan, you look at wrestling like a fight scene in a movie. If you put it on and there's two people who look like they live next door to you, you don't really want to watch it all the time. So there's a lot of that goes into it. Sometimes it's just a skill set that people have, that, you know, incredible skill set. But because it's a tournament, you don't have to look at it as much as the entertainment kind of it. You look at it as like the cruiserweight show we did, came off like a sporting event, and that was there was a lot of thought from my part went into who's the best we can get for this, and you know, the fellas actually not just do loads of moves, but look like they can actually fight, and the moves look like they hurt people, and there's a lot of that thought goes into it on my part, and that's the same with this crew here. You look at everybody, and it's not one of them. Nobody's going to go, well, this might be entertainment, but he looks like he knows what he's doing, and that's a big thing to us. So, because it's just what we do, and that's the whole what we're trying to do going forward.
My best advice would be, I guess, just be different, stand out. I mean, you take one look at the cruiserweight division, and the guy that's really standing out is Jack Gallagher, and that is simply because he is so different to the rest of the competitors. And I believe to cut in, especially with the landscape being how it is, there's so much product out there, so many performers out there. You really need to, you know, do your best to stand out.
I don't get back very often, but I try to follow as best I can on Twitter and Instagram, and you know, I'm good friends with a lot of the boys out here, so they keep me up to date on a lot of what's happening. Obviously, huge fan of the scene for a long time, and a scene that I believe is kind of not been given the platform that it deserves, and I think that, you know, this is really going to trigger something that's going to, you know, catapult, you know, the entire UK wrestling scene onto the next level.
I heard about that product probably the same time as you did. Well, it's not hard to look up when I was here in the summer scouting people. I'll leave it at that. You know, we've had this idea. This is not something that's just come up, right? I mean, we know what we're doing. I probably knew about that other thing maybe a week before anybody else knew, because I knew somebody involved in it. We had all that's why I've been able to put this together and get this team, because I know all these people, I had everything in line, and not just me, you know, also all of us. Robbie's part of this as well. We've scouted everybody. These fellas can go, and we put them through tryouts. You can check. So anybody, I'm happy to give you our tryout list. In fact, you can even look at it from November, the one we just did in Glasgow. You'll see most of these fellas, or they were on the one in April, or they were on one before, or they were at shows that I saw in July. So it was all well thought out, but you can't just throw things like this together. You have to plan them out and put it all together. So I hope that works as well, because if it does, great, because that's another group of fellas and ladies that will get a chance. We'll go from there, and that's more people that we can keep an eye on, and we'll end up, the best of them will come working for us one day anyway.
I know a lot of the guys, but a lot of the guys I don't know. A lot of the guys have kind of came up in the years that I've been gone from the UK, so a lot of the names are relatively unknown to me. Guys that I do know, Trent, Wolfgang, outstanding competitors. I expect they'll fare very well, and I'm excited to see it. I hope to make it there myself. Hope to be there in Blackpool to take it in on it. I mean, it's an exciting time for not only the UK scene, but the business as a whole. And the opportunity these guys are getting, it's crazy. On the network live in front of 1.5 million subscribers globally. It's there was nothing like this when I was growing up, so it's awesome.
It's significant for us just because that's where we started wrestling. But after doing NXT last year at the Empress Ballroom, it was the best wrestling venue I've ever been in. My favourite venue was the Tower Circus in Blackpool, and I've been, and I'm not Madison Square Gardens, all these places. I've never been in a venue that's had that kind of reaction. If you want to just look it up on YouTube, put in and because it's all beautiful and gold leaf and everything, it's going to look really cool on TV. But that really is the reason for it. Plus, I get to go home.
I mean, I don't see why not. Again, I'll reference back to NXT. No one expected NXT to be what it is today. And we've seen the NXT Championship be defended on pay-per-views, on Raw, on SmackDown. So, who's to say? It's certainly a possibility. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I went to America in '93, and I stood out because I'm just a normal person, but I was doing a lot of that style. Well, I did that style, and now it's come back in fashion over the last, because of probably Daniel Bryan, really. Having association with him in 2000, he sort of brought it back, and so most people don't remember me, but they remember watching him. A lot of the younger wrestlers saw him doing these things, and Nigel got trained in America, Nigel McGuinness, and I met him and I said, look, you're a British wrestler, learn how to be a British wrestler. So I sent him over here, and I sent Daniel Bryan over here to train with Robbie. He doesn't get the credit for their success, which he should do. He did probably as much, if not more, than me with Bryan, and definitely more with Nigel. And then they sort of had their thing, people watching them, and a lot of people started watching the old wrestling, British wrestling, and so there was groups of people doing it, and there was little bits of people doing it. So to see it now, sort of where people are back doing it again, am I proud of that? Yes. But is it the proudest thing I've done? The proudest thing I've ever done in wrestling is just being fortunate in the last 5 years to be a part of NXT, just because of how it's changed the view of what we do. We had it knocked into us when we were young. Keep quiet and don't say anything, and don't put yourself over, right? We don't talk about ourselves. It's not like, don't really like saying, what you can do and what you can't do. But to see younger people being interested in that and actually bringing it forward, it's a great thing.
I can remember he'd gone to America by this stage, and wrestling schools had come in, and people wanted to wrestle like Americans, and I used to say, well, you're from England, There's 2,000 Americans and Canadians out there. What's going to make you stick out? You know, go back and watch the greats. Go back and watch Billy Robinson. Go back and watch Johnny Saint. Go back and watch Mark Rocco, Marty Jones, who were light years ahead of us.
Ahead of the time.
And I think that's why Jack Gallagher sticks out so much, because he doesn't strafe, you know, he sticks to predominantly British style. And you know, you can't just stick with that, because wrestling is wrestling. You've got to be able to adapt on a nightly basis. But I've always firmly believed in what was taught to me, because it was drilled into him. And once it's drilled into you, you can't. You know, I didn't. We used to have referees that, like Max Ward and Peter Zakash. If you punch someone, they'd go right. They'd take it as a deliberate kind of knock against them, get out, and they'd disqualify you. And you go, second round, we've got six rounds to do here, and they come out and they go to the promoter, and then you get a rollicking at the end of it, because you've disrespected the referee. So we had, like punching, it always seems a bit strange to me, like, but it's a big part in a match over here. But certainly, for me to see this, it's more like it's an incredible watershed moment in my career.
And the thing is, with British wrestlers, if you go back and trace the history of British wrestling, British wrestlers were the wrestlers that went all over the world. Because when you can wrestle, you can go to any country and wrestle anybody. If you can only do a certain style, you're stuck basically where you're from. If you go back and look at the pioneers of all the different countries, with the exception of Mexico, because they had their own style, they were all British wrestlers, and that's a fact. Go back and talk to Bret Hart, ask him about the influence of what made Calgary different. If you watch him, he was doing British wrestling moves. He was putting proper wrist locks on where a lot of Americans didn't, and because there was and even in tech, Dory Funk Jr., one of the most famous American wrestlers, you go and watch him and he'll tell you himself he was trained by the British wrestlers. He understood that. Nick Bockwinkel used to tell me all the time, you fellas are, you can go all over the world. That's why you wanted in Japan, that's why you wanted here, that's why you wanted in Africa, in Germany, because when you can wrestle anybody in any style. When you can only do punches and kicks or do flying moves, well, it's no good when you can't talk to somebody who has to. You can't. Because 9 times out of 10, you used to go to a country, you never even saw your opponent. You start to go out there and improvise a 5-minute round match or an hour match without any kind of talking to people. Wrestling is wrestling, and that goes. And I'll mention, this is great about the Mexican wrestlers. They were all, although they have a different style, when they came to WCW, I was one of the few guys that could, and me and Dean Malenko were the only really 2 guys that could wrestle any of them that hadn't been there, because we could just wrestle. And we didn't have to speak to, we could actually wrestle, because they all get trained incredibly well with the art form of wrestling. And when you can do that, which all these fellas can do now, you can go anywhere in the world, you just adapt. Okay, most of my WWE career, I'm supposed to be a wrestler, I did strikes and kicks and pull faces, because that's what they needed me to do.
Yeah.
Very rarely ever wrestled. People go, oh, you did that. No, I didn't. I did in WCW, I did a lot more wrestling, a lot of comedy and stuff, but I didn't do much British wrestling in WWE. It was just because it wasn't needed, and I didn't really, that wasn't what they wanted me to do. I was a character. So, wrestling is wrestling, and if you can wrestle, you're always going to, and they used to say that, it's not the case as much anymore, but if you can really wrestle the British style, you'll always have a job, as long as you look the part. And that's not the same, because there's not as many companies now, but it still really is. Yeah. All these fellas here are the ones that go and look at the date sheets where they're going. Yeah. They're the ones that are like Trent and Tyler and all. They're the ones in Germany. They're the ones going to America. They're the ones, because they can all wrestle. And that's what you need to be able to do.
Perfect. Thank you.